everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have another minute or so as people are hopping on the meeting. We appreciate you joining us today. We're going to get started on time because we value your time and want to make sure we get everything in that we have planned. So thanks so much, like I said, for being here as people are coming in. We're just going to give it maybe another couple seconds. It did turn, I'm on the East Coast, so it is 12:30 here. But I see a few more people trickling in. But that's great. We're going to go ahead and get started. So again, thank you everybody for being here. My name is Vanessa Lombardo. I am the Training and Learning Manager here at Bookshare, and I am excited to be here today with my friend Jason from BuddyBooks. Jason, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Jason Stewart from BuddyBooks, Director of Customer Success, and we're thrilled to be here with you, Vanessa. Thanks for inviting us.
Absolutely. We are always happy to have our partners here with us and being able to talk about accessible educational materials and, Bookshare and how it works with BuddyBooks. So Jason, I'll pass it back to you.
All right. Thanks, Vanessa. So to start us off today, we just have a quick poll question to better understand what your role is in the reading landscape. So Vanessa, if you'll launch the poll, if everyone can answer on your screen, and we'll give it just a few seconds or so for everyone to respond and see who our audience is today. This is always the hardest part. It's so tough to give adults appropriate wait time.
Yes.
All right. Are you seeing them roll in on your end, Vanessa?
Mm-hmm. I am.
Okay, just a few more seconds to get your votes in. And then Vanessa, if you'll share those once you see that they stop coming in, we'll look and see who's with us today.
Sure. Yeah, I think we are pretty good.
All right. So looking at that, it looks like the majority are special ed teachers. We have some assistive technology specialists with us, and then other. And I don't see on my end what the roles the others are. You may, Vanessa, but we've got a good mix of folks that are here with us today. So we're super excited that you've joined us, and I'm going to hand it back off to Vanessa to kick us off, and I'll be back shortly to tell you more about BuddyBooks.
Wonderful. So yeah, so just of course a couple learning objectives, right? What we're hoping to accomplish in our time together here today. We want to, of course, just explain briefly what Bookshare is, for anyone who does not know about Bookshare and who qualifies, right? Who's eligible for that service. Jason, as he said, is going to explain what BuddyBooks is and how it specifically supports students who struggle to read. And then we're going to demonstrate how BuddyBooks and Bookshare are working together, and that, being able to take your Bookshare membership further for your students. So what is Bookshare? So it is an accessible online library of millions of titles. We have all different types of books. So we have textbooks, novels. We're going to get a little bit into the collection in a minute, but all of those books are available in alternative formats. So if a student wants to listen through the audio, they can do that. If they want to listen with the audio with text to speech and have highlighted text go across the screen as they're reading, they can do that. If they need the book in Braille, that's available, or large print. So all of the books that we have in the collection are available in these variety of formats to really be able to provide the materials to the students in the ways that best work for them. And Bookshare is free for members who are qualified in the United States, because we are funded by the U.S. Department of Ed, more specifically the Office of Special Education Programs, or OSEP, if you are familiar. So it is free for students in the United States. So what is in the collection? Like we said, we have these, millions of books. We work closely with the publishers, and that is how generally we are getting the books. And so these are, again, some of the types of categories of books that we have. the textbooks. We have statewide curriculum. Many teachers are using it for summer reading, right? Creating reading lists for required reading. We have the Lexi leveled readings, plenty of books for assigned and pleasure reading. Like I said, novels, award list winners, Newbery Award, New York Times bestsellers, lots of different study guides, the GED, the HISTE study guides, but lots of different ones. And the ways that the Bookshare collection is set apart. So for any of you who are using ebooks, right, if you're using Hoopla or Libby through your public library, or a variety of other, of course, services for ebooks, obviously available 24/7 for teachers and students. But there's no limits. So meaning if you want to read a popular book and it is, let's say, through your public library, you might go on to Hoopla or Libby. You might see that you are, there's 600 people who are in front of you who are requesting or wanting to read, that same book. The library only has a certain limit or a certain number, of the ebooks. However, with Bookshare, if 600 students need to read that book, across the country, there's no limit. So the book is available for when the student needs it. And there's no need to check it out. There's no need to return the book. Again, different, of course, than a public library or other entity. So you have the book and you have it. You can access it anytime you want to or need to. So let's talk a little bit about eligibility. So this is a very big point, and I do want to spend a little bit of time here in terms of what is an eligible person, right? What does that mean? So Bookshare operates under the US copyright law. So it's not education law, it's not the ADA, it is under copyright law, and it's essentially an exemption. And what that exemption says is that people of any age who have difficulty interacting with traditional print from one of these three kind of categories. So they have difficulty visually seeing the text, they have difficulty perceiving the text, or they have difficulty physically manipulating the text. And we're going to get more into the next couple of slides, like some examples and what does that actually mean. But the main point that I want to drive home, which is in bold on the bottom, is that to have or to be eligible for Bookshare, the student does not need an IEP or a 504. We don't want any of those documents. No one sends us those documents. It's not required at all. And we'll get a little bit into that, but sometimes we hear that, well, a student, this student, they don't have an IEP. They still can qualify for Bookshare. So what does some of this look like, right? What are some of the difficulties that someone might have with then being eligible for Bookshare? So potentially a student who has problems with decoding, they have difficulty with reading comprehension. Again, they cannot read the text due to some visual needs that they have. They can't hold a book, a standard book, right? They can't hold it physically in their hands. They can't manipulate the pages independently. Potentially they're receiving some additional support, right? Maybe they are receiving help through MTSS RTI. So again, some kind of ideas, right? Painting a picture. So thinking about the students that you're working with, the students that you're supporting, if they are struggling to read and they kind of fall into some of these categories, they may be eligible for Bookshare. And really, it is this, when you kind of boil all of this down, right, that it's a student who has an identified need, right? Someone in the school has said, or their parents, someone that they're working with has said, they have a need for a reading accommodation, right? They're struggling with reading. We're trying to give them some accommodations, and therefore they could potentially qualify for Bookshare. Before I pass it over to Jason, of course, I want to take a pause just to see if there are any questions. We have the chat and the QA open and available, of course. But just so if you do have a question, please feel free to put it in there, and we will be happy to answer it. Crystal, hi, how you doing? I see your question, is this recording or presentation going to be accessible later? So yes, it will be. You will get the recording in a post-event email. And so yes, that will be available. Thank you so much for asking that. And that is the only question that I see at the moment, unless, oh, wait, maybe something else. Michelle. Oh, yes. Okay. So, right. So students who are not native English speakers, right? I get this question a lot. So does that make a student eligible is what I'm assuming that there's that question, right? So they're not a native English speaker, do they qualify for Bookshare? And so the answer to that question is a little nuanced, but if it is because not only, I guess essentially, not only is that they're not a native speaker, right, that would qualify them for Bookshare, but as they are learning English or even in their native language, right, are they having those difficulties that we already mentioned, right? So it's not an automatic qualifier, I would say. We get this question in terms of students who might have another type of, let's say, ADHD, autism. So we know that students have a variety of needs. If reading is one of those needs, if they have difficulty with reading or they might have a learning difference, based on that, then yes, they would qualify for Bookshare. Incidentally, with going back to native English speakers, we do have books in a variety of languages. And so sometimes that is a little bit of a bridge. But the question is essentially, regardless of what language they are speaking, right, or language that is their native language, if they're having those difficulties that are already mentioned, then that could provide that Bookshare eligibility. And then just one more before I pass it over to Jason. And as we go through, I can always type answers in. So Hala, as educators who are supporting students who are visually impaired, how do we register? And I'll put some links in the chat of how to sign up a student individually or as a school, you can sign up as well and then have the student there. So thank you all for those questions. Appreciate it. Jason, I will go ahead and pass it along to you.
All right, thanks, Vanessa, and thank you for that great explanation of who's eligible for Bookshare. At Objective Ed, we're on a mission to help Bookshare spread the word about eligibility and to get books, regardless of the format, into kiddos' hands. We're extremely thankful for our partnership with Bookshare, which does allow us to add one more way, in addition to what Vanessa has already shared, one more way for students to access high-quality literature. And I'll get to exactly how we do that with BuddyBooks in just a bit. BuddyBooks, whose development is funded through the National Science Foundation, has shown tremendous growth for students. In fact, most kids reading great content from Bookshare via BuddyBooks achieve around 2 years of growth in a year. So next slide, please, Vanessa. And I know these charts are kind of small, kind of hard to see, but hopefully you can get the gist of what I'm trying to convey. So this summer, we ran a 5-week program at the Edna Runner Tutorial Center in Jupiter, Florida. And they serve high-risk kiddos in low-income areas. And in just 5 weeks, and the kids were reading about 3 times per week, and it varied how much time they spent, from 15 to 30 minutes a day as they were reading, not huge amounts of time, but reading 3 days per week. We saw in the data an increase of about 10% in the students' accuracy and an increase of around 10 correct words per minute over that 5-week period. And that was for both kids that were starting out far below grade level, and then for other students who were maybe just a little bit below grade level. Next slide, please. So while BuddyBooks is not a reading curriculum, it does support all of the things we know from the science of reading, from working on vocabulary development to fluency and comprehension, and perhaps one of the most important things we do, at least in my opinion, keeping kids motivated and engaged as they're doing the reading. Next slide. So what exactly is BuddyBooks, and how is it different from just using Bookshare alone? BuddyBooks is an alternative to traditional audiobooks. Students don't just listen and follow along with the text. They read out loud. Books are assigned via our integration with Bookshare, and then what happens is the computer reads to the student, and then the student reads to the computer out loud. And while doing that, we're actually using AI to capture the student's voice, and we analyze it. We can tell you how long they read, we can tell you how well they read, all the way down to the phoneme level. And you can even go back and listen to passages that the students read when you weren't sitting there with them. I often think about older students who are very reluctant to read out loud with their teachers or their parents because they're embarrassed that they're not good readers. We see those students being willing to read with BuddyBooks because it's an inanimate object. It's the computer. It breaks down barriers for those kiddos. So here's a short video showing BuddyBooks in action. So next slide, please, Vanessa. I am not hearing the audio on this one, Vanessa. It didn't. We tested this ahead of time, y'all. It worked beautifully. I wonder if it's because you're muted.
So let me just see one other quick thing. Is that not the way it goes, right? That when you
Right.
test it, it works fine. And then when you go
The
to,
dogs played on the grass.
so I'm gonna just pop out of it real quick, and then I'm gonna try to start it from the, just start it again, because I want to make sure we get the full video. Okay, great.
Lila brought Juliet and Dagger, Pogue came with Arrow and Rufus, and soon Queen Selena and Lady Griffin joined them.
Here we all are, Rolf said, rather glumly.
The dogs played on the grass, and Lorcan joined them. Seeley stayed within reach, ready to leap at his harness if he showed signs of trying to follow Lilith now. Lady Griffin, who normally didn't pay attention to Lilith's girls, since she was not allowed to eat them, positioned herself nearby as well, and kept one eye on Lorcan in a motherly way.
I think we'll be all right, Seeley said. We can do this.
We don't have much of a choice, Lila pointed out.
And that's just a quick example of the back and forth that the student does. There are a variety of different ways that you can set that, where the student is reading larger chunks of text or they're echoing back what the computer read to them. We're also seeing some early indications that BuddyBooks is also very beneficial for students with autism who are also struggling or striving readers. So let's hear from an autism center that used BuddyBooks this summer. So if you'll start this video for me, Vanessa.
Well, we are celebrating our 10th anniversary here at Connections, and I am one of the founders of Connections, comprehensive educational facility that actually serves students and adults ages 3 through 22. So we have RIMS, we have a charter school downstairs for ages 3 through 14, a high school and vocational program for students ages 14 to 22, and then an adult day program for clients over the age of 22. You know, some of the real kind of stringent approaches to teaching reading often don't work with our students. Tapping into the strengths of students with autism and finding what works with them. But reading has always been a struggle from the get-go with students with autism, especially in the comprehension areas. So, you know, you want to learn how to read so that you can read for enjoyment.
A lot of our students just don't like to read. You know, reading's hard for our students. Comprehension is hard. Just reading in general is hard for our population. To be honest, I was expecting it to be a behavior issue with kids not wanting to do it, especially since it was summer and it's camp and that stuff. Overall, I think it was a very good experience. We actually had some of the kids requesting to do it. It's actually one of my goals. Was I was kind of hoping that reading could become a leisure skill for some of our students, because obviously, one, they don't have leisure skills, and reading is a very hard thing for our kids. So that was very nice and exciting to see, is some of the kids requesting to do it. Some of the kids, when their 15 minutes was up, they were like, oh, I want to keep going. So that was really nice. Two of our adults are very quiet. They tend to not talk at all. So having them have to read out loud actually took it, and they generalized that in other areas where they were talking more beyond just the BuddyBooks. So that was actually cool to see as well. The two that I was just talking about, they choose not to talk. With Lexi, we had a hard time with the mic picking her up because she was so low. Also, mom was working with her at home with it as well. So the more she did it, the louder she got with reading. The echo mode was probably the best thing for our kids. Joy that they had, and they want to read. So yes, overall, it was a huge success.
I can't how thankful we are for you choosing us, you know, for this project and getting involved. It really is, like I said, it's been great to see.
All right. So I've only touched on the tip of the iceberg about BuddyBooks. I could spend the whole time just talking about what we do and some of the methodologies behind it. But let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Vanessa, and we'll wrap up this section with another quick poll. So if you, and while she's switching that over, if you're interested in us doing a more in-depth webinar for you or other colleagues that work with struggling readers, let us know, and we can work on scheduling some time with you. While you are going through and answering this poll, a question came in via the chat that says, how do we sign up our students for BuddyBooks? So all of my contact information will be displayed in a little bit at the end and as we go through and wrap up the webinar. I will say, while the Bookshare portion of what we're doing is completely free for students through the U.S. Department of Education grant that Vanessa mentioned, BuddyBooks is a fee service, and that's primarily because of the cost we incur for AI to analyze the book content that the students are reading. So if you're interested in more along the lines of what the cost is for BuddyBooks, my contact information will be there, and I'll be happy to have some conversation with you. We have worked very hard to keep the cost as low as possible, just covering our expenses so that it is accessible for students. All right, so a few folks not interested. We have some folks that are, so we'll follow up with you if you would like to learn more about it. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Vanessa.
Excellent. All right.
The 10th
Because so let's go back here and then here. So would just love to share a couple of resources, like we said, in terms of, Bookshare, getting started, being able to provide some of that baseline, and then obviously continuing on, if you choose with BuddyBooks, and obviously in terms of just the amount of data. I mean, I'm always very intrigued, Jason, and maybe we could talk about that in a second, but just in terms of the amount of information that you can get on how a student is reading, where they're struggling, where they're doing okay, and really being able to target the instruction in that way, I think is really, really beneficial, just obviously to make data-based informed decisions. So I certainly encourage anyone to follow up and get a little more information. But in terms of the Bookshare, content and kind of our training resources, we have a whole new help and learning center. So the Bookshare website itself, and I did put it in the chat, bookshare.org has been the same website. We've been around for 25 years, but it has a new look. So we completely redid it. And so now our help and learning center, we really tried to focus on making the information as easy to access as possible, very, very clear, and for educators to be able to share it, right, with families, with their other colleagues. And so there's all these links are live. Again, you're going to have the slide deck. And so you can go into the Help and Learning Center. We have an ABCs for educators. So really anyone who's getting started would find that information helpful. We do have a free reading tool, Bookshare Reader, that obviously students can use, and then obviously our partner tools as well. And the last thing that I would just want to point out, actually, Jason and I were talking about continuing education credits before we got on this call, in regard to always, really trying to think about not only Bookshare, but what is the basis for Bookshare, right? What's accessible educational materials? How are we supporting students in the area of reading? So we, Bookshare teamed up this summer with the Iris Center at Vanderbilt University, and we created an online course. And so it does have CE credits through Vanderbilt University. Again, the link is there, but it really talks a lot about what are accessible educational materials, who are the students that we're talking about, why is it beneficial, and then obviously some of the Bookshare how-to, right? Bookshare being a repository of the accessible educational materials, as we talked about before. So those are some of the links there. And Bookshare does have a customer support team. As you might imagine, this back to school time is a very busy time for this team. But we do have email and telephone support. There's a contact us and then a telephone number as well if you prefer to give us a call. And so we are able to support you in that way. Jason, you want to talk a little bit about BuddyBooks as well?
Sure. So our support is pretty straightforward. We're available from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Central Time. If you did not notice, I'm located in a different locale than Vanessa. We were talking about that beforehand as well. I am based in East Texas, if the accent did not give me away. Easiest way to reach our support is just via email, support@objectiveed.com. You can learn more about BuddyBooks by going to objectiveed.com as well. And then, Vanessa, there was a message that came through that said that the chat was disabled, so they could not click on the links within the chat. So I think I posted the Bookshare website just in the Q&A session as well. But just to reiterate, it's bookshare.org or objectiveed.com.
Okay. Oh, thank you so much. That was clearly an oversight on my part, so I apologize for that. But thank you, Jason, for putting that in there. Okay. So I know there's a couple of questions, but actually we have a survey, but I want to just skip to this. This is obviously the contact information that Jason was talking about before. So if you would like to directly get in touch with either of us, jason.stewart@objectiveed.com. I am Vanessa L. at benetech.org. So please feel free, to reach out with specific questions. Happy to answer those for any one of you. And then we do have a very brief survey. We're always, of course, trying to improve our professional development and learning opportunities. So if you wouldn't mind, we would appreciate it. It's I think a 5 or 6 question survey. So we always appreciate that. And I do want to go back over to the chat or I should say the QA, because the chat is disabled. So Rita, you have a question. Can you transfer an institutional membership to an individual membership, or can they have both? So I'm so glad you asked this question. So the first thing is, yes, they can have both. And we encourage them to have both for this reason. So if someone signs up under a school, right, and an institution, typically it's a school district, so they sign up under the school, the student has to wait for someone to assign a book to them in order for them to read it. So right now, if anyone goes on bookshare.org, anyone can see what's in the collection, but you need to log in to have access to the books. Because again, for that qualification, that eligibility purpose. But also, again, if you're a student who's part of a school or some other institution, you do have to wait for someone to assign the book to you. If the student has an individual membership, number one, it stays with them for life because the institutional membership is attached to that school. So when the student graduates, when they move, when they go from primary school to middle school, it's a different building. Maybe it's not a district-wide account. Maybe it was just the elementary school's account. So now there's a disruption in the service. So we really want the student to have both memberships, and they can have both are free. But the other thing is, for the individual membership, if that student uses it, they could use it through post-secondary. So when a student goes to a community college, junior college, higher ed, vocational training, OSEP does cover that as well. And adults can use Bookshare, of course, but there is a fee because they're not covered under OSEP for obvious reasons, unless, again, they are, doing some type of continuing education. So yes, they can have both, and we do prefer that they have both for the reasons that I said. So thank you so much for that question. And then Mary, I see there's one other question. Where is this information? Oh, about signing up for Bookshare. You've utilized it in the past. And right, the passwords, yes. And that's part of that sort of a similar conversation, right? With with having both, if they do have that individual membership. So in regard to signing up, I'm gonna type that in here in a second again. But when you go onto bookshare.org, it's gonna have a sign up link. It's in the top right quadrant. It's gonna say either log in or sign up, and then you're gonna be presented with some choices. So there's that individual membership. There's gonna be the district-wide account or organizational membership, or again, as an adult, as a paying member as well. So right, and then forget the password. So of course, when you go to log into Bookshare, as most other services, right, if you forget your password to anything, there's a forgot your password link, and they can reset it if they have that individual membership. If the password has been set by the school, sometimes that's a little trickier to be able to get that. Mary, just incidentally, of course, the customer service team can also help, with some of those inquiries. But again, just to repeat, if the student has an individual membership, there's that continuity. So even through the organizational membership, again, they leave that school, they move, they transfer, they at least still have access on their individual membership. And then Maureen, your cost, right? Your question regarding the cost for non-students, so an adult who is not continuing education, not higher ed or anything like that. It is $80 a year. It is annual. So it gets renewed annually should you choose to renew. But all those non-limits that we talked about, similarly, right, for adults, they can borrow the books, they can borrow as many, as they need to. They don't have to return them. So all of that same structure is in place. But the OSEP grant only covers students, in K-12 or post-secondary. It does not cover adults. So thank you so much for that question.
Vanessa, there's one more. You may have addressed this one, but I think we may have skipped over it. So the
Sure.
question, so the team or individual working with the student is the team or individual working with the student the competent authority to qualify the student as an eligible person?
That is correct, right? So the competent authority, which again, when you look at the actual copyright law, there's that word, that verbiage in there. So right, so that could be the general ed teacher, the special ed teacher, the AT specialist, the reading specialist. It does not have to be a medical professional. It can be, but that is not a requirement either. So there is a list of competent authorities on the website. But right, when you go to register a student, so let's just say quickly, because I know we're at time, you register the school has an account, you're a teacher on that account, you type in the information for the student, and there are just check boxes on there that say, yes, you're saying the student has difficulty accessing standard print because of those three kind of broad categories, and that's it. You don't need to provide any additional documentation. You working in the school with the student closely, you are the competent authority, and you can say that for the student. So thank you, Deborah, for that. All right, wonderful. Well, thank you all again so much. Thank you for your time. We very much appreciate you being here today. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and please look out for a post-event email. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.